You're listening to Notch 6 at the LCCA National Convention from Boston, Massachusetts. You can find all the news and interviews from this convention at notch6.com. The following is a production of Notch 6 Media.
It's the Notch 6 online podcast, episode number 58. Notch 6 is on the road again as we travel to Boston, Massachusetts for the 45th annual LCCA National Convention. It's going to be a great week of programming. We kick tonight off with Kolis and O-Gauge Railroading's Ed Boyle. It's all ahead on this episode of Notch 6.
This is the Notch 6 online podcast. Notch 6 is the podcast dedicated to O-Gauge trains. Whether you're collecting, operating, or just getting started, Notch 6 is your home for O-Gauge news, events, and interviews. Now here is your host, Derek Thomas.
Well, welcome to another episode of Notch 6, brought to you each and every episode by your friends at trains.com. That's trains spelled with a Z. Need your trains fixed fast? Check out the National Model Train Service Center at service.trains.com. Thanks to trains.com for sponsoring the show and getting us out to Boston, Massachusetts. That's right, it's LCCA Convention Week. The road to Boston ends here. And as has become tradition with this show and with these programs every year, I get to spend a week with my lovely co-host. He is the president-elect of the LCCA. He is the one, the only, Kolis. Al, welcome back. We get to do this again.
Well, thank you, Derek. We're proud to be part of this Notch 6 podcast. We're very excited here. We're at the Danvers, Massachusetts. We're at the Doubletree Hotel in the North Shore, and we're excited. This is our 45th annual convention, and Lionel is celebrating their 115th year as well. So we got a lot of fun and exciting things planned for the week. But thank you for having us. We'll hopefully we'll be seeing Henry in a little bit.
Henry is along for the ride for this convention, and it's a bit strange to be traveling with a 14-month-old, and we're going to need some extra grace from people on the plane during this trip, but I think we'll end up okay. I'm just excited because you're right. This is going to be a big party all week. It's always a big party every year. But with it being the 45th anniversary of the LCCA and the 115th anniversary of Lionel, it makes this year a little bit more special. And there's nothing better than getting a group of your friends together from all over the United States in one place to share the joy and the passion and the enthusiasm that is the O-Gauge hobby. And so, man, we've just got a big week in front of us. Tell me some of the things that you personally look forward to from this convention every year.
Well, Derek, I think the first thing is the people, and I just absolutely love the members that get together once a year at our annual conventions. My kids have been coming to the convention since 1995. They've literally grown up in the LCCA, and so the people come up and they're just wonderful people from all over the country, all different walks of life. But they all have a common passion and interest in Lionel trains. So that makes it all worthwhile. It's kind of a bittersweet moment for us in the sense that Lou Capone was the president at the time, who is no longer with us. But the city of Boston is an East Coast city that Lou wanted to go have a convention at. And so we were able to make it happen. Bob Carter and Jerry Calkins, our convention co-managers, and their team have been working very hard to arrange this great convention. So, we do want to honor Lou and celebrate his life and continue to, move the club forward. We have so many fun and interesting things to do this week. We have an opportunity to experience this part of the country. And as you know, Boston, played a unique role in our country's independence. So there's a lot of tours dedicated towards those types of activities. We have the Boston's Historic Freedom Trail, and we have the Tea Party Ship Museum, and we'll have a traditional clam bake, and then another Bewitching Day tour in Salem. So we have a lot of non-train related things. We try to like we said last year, we try to experience the city. We want to get the local people involved. We're involved with the Boston Metro High Railer Club. They're going to be a tour this year. We just have so many different things going on. It's hard to tell us just one or two highlights. For me, obviously, we're doing an event with Autism Speaks on Thursday morning at the hotel with the Lionel layout. We're working on getting a child from the local Make-A-Wish Foundation. I just found out today that one family is going to have to back out, so we're trying to make arrangements for a second family. So that's obviously a big, important event for us as well. Lionel, the highlight of the week is the Lionel seminar on Friday. Each member that attends that is going to receive a special gift from Lionel. And so we have a lot of surprises scheduled throughout the week. There's no one highlight, but there's going to be trains, and more trains, and Lionel trains.
Absolutely. And I tell you what, one of the things that's cool about the LCCA conventions, a lot of our listeners are familiar with going to York, and one of the challenges when you go to York is getting FaceTime with the reps at Lionel, for the simple fact that the Lionel booth is absolutely just mobbed all week at York. And one of the cool things about the LCCA conventions is when the Lionel team rolls into town, they roll in with the entire team, from Howard and everybody on down, and you'll hear from most of them during this week. But the cool thing is you can walk into the convention hall in the early afternoon, and it's really easy to get access to the folks at Lionel and get a chance to talk with them at length and not feel like somebody's breathing down your neck waiting to talk next. And that's one of the unique things that the LCCA convention offers, is a chance to really get up close with the folks that make Lionel happen. And just one of those advantages that I don't think we talk about a lot is like I said, you're going to get some new product news first. You're going to hear some things from Lionel that you're not going to hear anywhere else. And it all happens, while we're here in Boston. So definitely some cool things on tap this week.
Oh, absolutely. And Derek, we've just been going on a year now where the Lionel Railroader Club's members all became LCCA members. So our relationship with Lionel is even stronger than it was in previous years. Obviously, we have Lionel in our name. We're very proud of our heritage and our history with Lionel, and it's getting better and better every day. Lionel brings their operating layouts, the interactive layouts with the legacy controllers. They bring the little cardboard tables for the Lion Chief sets, and they're there. They're going to be set up from Wednesday through Saturday, and we're encouraging the public to come down there. Lionel's going to be open from 9 to 2, and then from 4 to 8 on Tuesday and Wednesday. They're going to shut it down on 3 o'clock on Friday for the seminar, but it's just a great opportunity to meet with the Lionel team, pick their brain, give them your feedback. Lionel has made, based upon input they received from our members during the convention, they've incorporated it into their product lineup. They listen to our members. They appreciate our loyal membership, and our membership appreciates and loves Lionel.
Something I heard last year during the convention that kind of stuck with me when we were in Indianapolis, and I can't remember who from the Lionel team said it, but they said, if you walk through this convention and you cut anybody, they bleed blue and orange. And that's so true. The people that you're going to meet at this convention and that you're going to interact with, these are the core of the hobby. These are the hardcore, enthusiasts that you cut them and they bleed blue and orange.
I know members that have bought literally every item in the Lionel catalog. I mean, they're that rabid fans. I mean, they just truly love Lionel trains.
You know what's cool about this, and this is, I don't know, and maybe this is just me, but from an outsider's perspective, the hobby has always been seen as I don't know, a little awkward, especially down through the years now. But the thing about the convention, and this is the something that I just felt immediately, especially last year in Indianapolis, you feel like you're at home. You're with people that understand the language that you're speaking, And that is such a cool feeling that you're surrounded by people who share the same passion and enthusiasm that you do for the hobby.
That's true, Derek. Sometimes, like when you're in a work environment or you're in a professional environment and you tell people you collect and play with Lionel trains, they look at you like you're from a different planet. It's like, no, I haven't grown up yet, and I'm proud of that. But it is a very comforting feeling when you're around people that have a common interest. And what I really get a sense of is a sense of family. You know, the people at the LCCA are so warm. They're the best of the best, and you truly feel like family. And the LCCA, volunteer leadership teams makes a concerted effort to welcome people, first-timers. We have a first-timers reception party. Everybody starts off in this hobby as a first time, and it can be kind of intimidating. And we remember that, and we try to be outgoing and welcoming. And I think sets the tone for the entire week. It starts at our registration desk when people come in and they register and they receive a 45th anniversary Lionel trolley as part of their registration gift. I mean, it sets the tone, and it continues all week long. It's just one thing after another after another. We have Angela Trana-Thomas is going to be doing two art classes. One that's going to be dedicated for the children and the junior membership program, and the other one is going to be for the adults. And in that class, she's going to make a small original painting that's going to be auctioned off at our silent auction on Saturday night at our banquet. So, there's just so many things. There's something for everybody in the entire family, from grandparents to parents to children to single people. There's something for everyone. And if you don't have a good time, then I don't know. The plate is set.
It's very difficult, if not impossible, not to have a good time at one of these events. If you have any kind of enthusiasm for Lionel, you're pretty much in heaven all week. And like I said, one of the hallmarks of these conventions is the LCCA does an awesome job at providing experiences that you're never going to get anywhere else. A great example, and I don't know if anything's going to come close to this, but last year to wrap up the convention in Indianapolis, and I don't think you and I ever discussed this because we had recorded our last show by this point, but last year at the end of the Indianapolis convention, Lionel, since Lionel does Lionel die-cast collectibles as well for the NASCAR market, Lionel set us up a very special experience at the Brickyard 400. And one of the things that and I had no idea what to expect when we got into this, but I remember you and I walked into the track and suddenly, we're getting whisked away by the Lionel people into this fenced off area. And I remember looking behind us, and you see probably, 2,000 to 3,000 people behind this fenced off area, and suddenly we're walking behind the fences. Lionel serves us lunch, and then the icing on the cake before the race is Lionel stands us out in this line as the drivers come out of the driver area. We were literally, you could reach out and touch the superstars of NASCAR. And this is just an experience that you're not going to get anywhere else. And the LCCA just thrives on building these kind of experiences into the convention.
Yeah, that was a great time, Derek. The race car drivers were actually signing autographs, giving people high fives. Lionel was very generous in giving away gifts. We gave a train set to Brian Finley, a youngster from Arkansas. Just they went over the top, and it was just, our people in the train hobby don't get a chance to experience Lionel NASCAR very much. And this, we got a glimpse of what they do on a year-round basis at these NASCAR races. It was just a phenomenal experience. This year in Boston, we're going to follow up with a post-convention train excursion. We're going to be on the Providence and Worcester Railroad. So that's another special event that we're planning on. In addition to that, at the other end, we got bookends at the bookend special events for this convention. Today, we had an opportunity to go to one of our, a couple of our members. They have a premier layout. Marty Fitzhenry has a phenomenal layout with a catenary system, and it's just out of this world. In fact, he took the rollers off the engines because people didn't believe that they're getting power from the catenary system. It runs so smooth, and when it's done properly, you don't even see that spark on the top wire. So it's just a well-engineered, well-designed, sturdy layout that's just spectacular. And then Marty Visnick, another LCCA longtime member, has a phenomenal collection of pre-war trains, just so vast in the rarity and then the scope of it in terms of the different variations, and it's just a phenomenal collection. To me, that again exemplifies what the LCCA is all about. These are two gentlemen. They're lifelong collectors. They love having people, come in their house. They're inviting complete strangers to come on in my house and literally be around. Some of them, in some cases, priceless trains. I mean, they're just, yeah, come on in, have a good time, and you just shoot the breeze with them, and that's what's so great about this hobby and this club. People like Marty. So it's phenomenal. And, that's one of the benefits of belonging to the LCCA. We get to do unique experiences. One of the things we struggle with as a convention is because we have so many people, but we love layout tours. We wish we could do more layout tours during a convention, but because our group is so large, and typically people tend to max out in the space of their layout in their rooms, they're not really designed for public viewing. It's not like an open museum. And so it creates a lot of logistics issues in trying to get the party happening. So in years past when we tried it, we'd have maybe a couple hundred very happy people that got on the tour, and then another 400 people that were very alienated because they couldn't get on the tour. We had to limit the space. So that's why we're tying in these special events as part of our convention. So it's our effort to make those layouts accessible. These are layouts that you see in TM books and videos, or you read about them in different magazines, OGR or Classic Toy Train. But this is something that you get to see in person. You get to talk to the man and the person that created this little empire. It's a great experience.
Sounds like we're going to have a phenomenal week ahead. We have the welcome reception tonight. And like I said, just talking a few minutes here, it's going to be a phenomenal week here in Boston. And I can tell that you're excited. I'm excited. It's going to be a good week, Al Kolis. I have a feeling.
Yes, and I encourage you, if you have friends that live in the Boston area, call them, invite them. We want the public out here starting on Wednesday when the Lionel layout's going to be starting up, and it'll be there for the remainder of the week through Saturday. Spread the word. We want to see as much public traffic as we can. We want to introduce Lionel trains to Boston.
It's going to be a great week. We're going to leave it there for tonight. We will be back from Boston with our feature interview right after these messages. Before tonight's feature interview, I want to take just a moment and let you know about a special deal we have from the Madison Poster Company in honor of the LCCA National Convention. Head on over to our website, madisonposter.com, and there you're going to find the only reproduction of Lionel dealer posters in the entire world. And these posters are pretty outstanding, if I do say so myself. These are the big giant murals you remember seeing in the department stores as a kid growing up, those ones that hung behind Lionel's amazing display layouts. Anyhow, head on over to madisonposter.com, use the keyword Boston at checkout, and for a limited time, we'll pick up the shipping on your poster. That's madisonposter.com and the keyword Boston for free shipping until August 7th, 2015.
This is Notch 6, your first source for breaking news and in-depth interviews in the world of O-Gauge.
Welcome back to Notch 6 from the LCCA National Convention in Boston, Massachusetts. We're going to have a fun discussion today, and Ed Boyle, who is a partner and the special projects manager over at O-Gauge Railroading Magazine, has done some fascinating talks over the past few years at the LCCA convention. This year is no exception. Ed, welcome back to the program. It's good to have you here.
Thank you, Derek. Glad to be here.
So the topic today and the topic that you're going to be covering at the LCCA convention is, does technology affect the value of the Lionel trains that we own? And this is a big can of worms, and I'm just excited to talk to you about it because there's so many different facets that go into the answer to that question. So why don't you give me kind of an overview of what your talk is going to cover, and then we'll start digging into some of the specific areas and see if between the two of us we can either complicate the issue more or shed some light on the realities of it.
I'll bet you and I can complicate the issue more. We're good at that. Derek, to start, it's become more and more apparent that technology is important in terms of valuing our trains. But the question before the House is how much more important it is. Is it important to everybody? Is it important? Are some people don't care one way or the other? They just move that transformer handle and that's fine with them. There's a whole variety of attitudes in terms of how we view our trains. From the very conservative in terms of the only thing I want to use is a transformer, to those who, if it isn't absolutely the latest technology that's packed into the locomotive or the accessory I have, I don't want to use it. So we have a whole spectrum of things. The question before the House is, okay, what does it really mean to us and what does it really mean to the hobby? So that's the overview.
I think one of the things that you bring up that's interesting is the fact that as a hobby as a whole, we are very accepting of a lot of different camps, and there's room for the people that want to run strictly conventional, and there's room for those of us that want the latest and greatest. And one of the areas that you and I draw from quite a bit is the O-Gauge Railroading Online Forum. And I wonder, are our views kind of skewed by the fact that the forum tends to be a group of more technologically savvy people? Do you think our view gets skewed by that, or do you think there's a shifting attitude overall through the hobby that technology is going to play a larger role than it has in the past?
I think the latter is true. That's why I brought up the topic. The thing is, it has become more and more apparent that technology is a factor in terms of the trains we buy and the trains that we use, and that this has really not been discussed in the sort of depth that it needs to be. Yes, conventional run. Yes, we have a pile of very knowledgeable techies on the forum, but if you saw those threads, and you did, there have been over 80 responses, and they range from, man, it doesn't matter to me, man, as long as the thing runs when I put current through it, to the latest and greatest. So, no, I think that starting about the late 1980s, it became apparent that there was a factor that had not been in O-Gauge trains before, and that was the technological factor. And as we've gone along, it's become more and more evident that we have to pay attention to this. In the columns I've been writing for Collector's Gallery, I always mention now functionality, and I have for the last several years, that this is a part of the value of the trains we buy, the trains we run, and the trains we collect.
You say functionality, and that leads into an interesting point that's been raised on the forum, and that is the functionality coming into the grading of these toy trains from a collector's aspect. And this is gonna, I almost am afraid to go down this rabbit hole, because you're going to discuss an issue that spans a lot of different areas.
Here's the thing. We can turn it into a rat hole, or we can say, look, it's something that exists. It's something you have to pay attention to if you're buying a train, or you probably need to. But I believe, and from what I've read, there are 80 plus responses, and over 1,000 folks have been looking at that thread. So it says that there's a great deal of interest about this. And it's going to be quite interesting when I do the talk on Wednesday to see if those views are mirrored in the audiences. But here's the deal. If we come up with something that's nothing more than a set of general guidelines, okay, that will be good enough. In other words, we're not going to say, well, Rail Sounds 4 is better than Rail Sounds, 2 or 2.5. No, it's not going to be like that. There have been some common sense metrics that are beginning to float to the surface from the responses I've seen on the forum. And I think a relatively simple set of metrics is perfectly possible. a very detailed set of measurements? Absolutely not. And we have to go that way. We have to those folks who want absolute precision are going to be out of luck with this. And we need to understand that going in to coming up with any sort of standards at all. They're not going to be hard and fast in the way certain appearance standards are. But we're going to be able to do some generalized things that will be quite helpful for people who are looking for trains and need a sense of, okay, what can this do for me versus what can that do for me? Okay, for example, an engine that has early rail sounds is going to have garbled crew talk because that's the way it was designed. If you're looking at something at a late model Rail Sounds 5, the sound will be quite a bit different. And it'll be quite a bit different than it is in Proto-Sounds 2 and Proto-Sounds 3 from MTH. And that needs to be taken into account. But that's as far as you take it, okay? You don't parse it any finer than that. Think of it as terms of coarsely chopped onions as opposed to, finely chopped vegetables. And we have to look at it that way. If it's made overly complicated, any kind of measurement or meter stick that we come up with will be totally and completely useless.
And even hearing you say, basing some of how we would possibly implement a grading standards, even based on the quality of the sound, is taking it even a little bit farther than I had thought about taking it.
No, not the quality of sound for an individual locomotive, but capabilities. For example, Rail Sounds 1, the earlier ones, is actuated by a transformer. You really have to go some to actuate it with remote controls. Whereas Rail Sound 5 was designed from the ground up for that. That's all. That's all it tells you is potential capability, and that's as far as you take it. Not what not what any individual locomotive will do. Also, we're sitting here, and a perfect example are the big boys. Okay, the latest and greatest is the Vision Line Big Boy, but there have been a great many of those models made over the last 20 years by both Lionel and their competitors, and they have different capabilities. Now, does that mean that the earlier ones are trash, and the only one that's really great and wonderful is the Vision Line Big Boy? I don't think so. I think that people will be perfectly happy with an earlier model one.
I think it just depends on what the consumer is after in terms of what are their requirements to be happy.
Exactly. Let's just use the analogy of car buying. Some people buy a new car or lease really a new car every 2 to 3 years, whether they need to or not, because they want the latest and greatest. Okay. Others are quite happy to have a car that functions well, looks good, gets reasonable, gas mileage, and it's just a fine car, and they'll keep it for 6 or 7 or 8 years. And I think we're in the same boat with this. Let me give you an example of a tactical error that goes back in history. Our friends in Maryland decided that what was going to happen after they chucked Proto-Sounds 1, that everybody would just buy the new locomotives, the Proto-Sounds 2 versions, in the same way that everybody got rid of their black and white televisions, and now, oh boy, they'll get color, or got rid of their old computers and got new ones. It wasn't like that. Okay, and I think that came as a shock to the MTH people, that people were not replacing their new their engines on a one-for-one basis, and that was the beginning of a kind of a reassessment on both sides, from the consumers and from the manufacturers.
Right, and I think that brings up an interesting point about the manufacturers, and that is the simple fact that as of this moment, twice a year, both manufacturers are introducing a new catalog, and in every one of those catalogs, yes, there are a few examples of newly tooled locomotives, but for the most part, it's the same locomotives, but with upgraded feature sets. So to say that the manufacturers aren't contributing heavily to this idea of turning the same engines into the market again and again, and the point was raised that contributes heavily to the decline in prices of some of these older locomotives, because wait 2, 3, 4, 5 years and there's going to be a new one with a completely different feature set available to you.
Well, that's been the history of things up till now. And the other thing is, a lot of this has to do with the leveling off of the O-gauge market and the cost of tooling. So, I mean, that sort of leads business people to make business decisions like that. That, okay, I really don't want to invest $250,000 to $300,000 on brand new tooling for something that I'm not sure is really going to sell. Whereas, hey, a new Hudson, I know those are constituency for that, even if it's not a New York Central version. Okay, but how do I induce people to buy a new one? Well, I give them better features, or what are perceived to be better features. Another way to look at this is some of the technological side roads that we've gone down. One of them is Lionel's button box. The idea was if you were sort of frightened of the Cab 1, okay, we're going to give you sort of a transition piece. It's going to look like a piece of equipment that can be right next to your transformer, but it'll do most of what a Cab 1 can do. And this fell foul to the fact that at the end, a production version of a button box was going to cost as much or more than a Cab 1 that could do more than it did. And so the thing was, okay, gang, we're going to show you that you can use a Cab 1. It's okay. And a perfect example of that is the fact that there's now the Cab 1L, which has totally new electronics in it, much more functionality, but uses the same case as the old Cab 1s did. And that has comforted a lot of people. Okay, even our tester George Brown does most of his testing these days with a Cab 1L, and then for those functions that the Cab 1L doesn't have, whips out his Cab 2 and does the rest of the tests. And I find myself as an operator. Oh God, I hate to say that. I'm also I'm an operator collector now. I've been thoroughly corrupted by this crowd at O-gauge railroading. I used to love stuff just on the shelf. I mean, there it was. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is you pay all this money for trains and they're just sitting there wrong. But I'm still have the collector gene big time. But the thing is, I find myself running my Lionel trains with my Cab 1L, and I'm a happy camper. Okay, there's certain functions that the Cab 2 doesn't have. Don't care. I find that interesting. Whereas other people would go, nope, got to have everything when I'm running my trains on my layout.
I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm not sure you're going to be able to put your finger on why, but I think you're going to have a better understanding than most people just because of how long you've been involved in the hobby and in the position you're in. Why do you think there has been a hesitation over the last 2 decades to adapt the technology? Are people just content the way it is, and why that attitude of, I don't want to mess with it?
I think it has a lot to do with demographics. There are certain folks in the hobby and outside the hobby who wouldn't touch a computer even at gunpoint. Okay, they won't do it. They'll have their spouses do it. They have their children or their grandchildren do it, and they're proud of the fact that they're computer illiterate. And we have a real hardcore of folks who feel that way in this hobby and have from day one. Think about this. The usual adoption curve for electronics is in the first couple of years, not much happens. And then by year 3, 80 or 90% of the people who have it use it. Now, what we've been finding is that although people demand every new bell and whistle for the engines that they buy, they don't use it. They just want it there because they feel it enhances the value of the engine that they bought. But they have no intention of using it. When Cab 1s were no longer going to be made because the electronics were thoroughly obsolete and they couldn't find the parts for them anymore, all of a sudden, pristine Cab 1s came out of everywhere, okay? People who had bought them 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago were selling them, and they were selling them at inflated prices for people because there was a need. People wanted them, and where the supply came from was not from Lionel. It came from private owners who've been leaving them on the shelf for years. Fascinating. And where we may see a potential breakthrough, and we're beginning to see bits and pieces of it now, is with the new Lion Chief technology, because it's radio control. It's a lot simpler. It's relatively less expensive, and it works great. And now we have the coming of the universal remote. That also is going to be great, because here's the deal: it'll control up to 3 locomotives, and most people who have layouts or are working with their children or grandchildren don't have any more than 3 locomotives that they're going to run at any given time. Okay, even the old TMCC, which could do 99 locomotives, do you really think most people were going to have 99 locomotives on a particular layout?
No.
I can think of some real huge layouts where maybe there's 10 or 12. The big change that we're going to see with electronics is the accessibility of people actually using them as opposed to having that capability. And where the breakthrough is beginning to occur is with radio control and Lion Chief, especially Lion Chief Plus.
I've been pleasantly surprised at the attitude towards the adoption of Lion Chief and Lion Chief Plus over the past few years. When it initially was announced and came into the market, I thought, perfect. What a great mid-level starter set in terms of moving people from the transformer controlled into that next step. And I've been really surprised that this has gone way beyond, not necessarily starter sets or entry-level hobbyists, but I'm really surprised at the higher-end hobbyists or the well-seasoned hobbyists that has been picking this technology up and seems to be really happy with it. And what's really interesting is I went up to Detroit to the offices a few months back and got a chance to play with the new Lion Chief Plus NW2, and the technology that's packed into that engine in terms of sound, smoke, and the lighting set is as good as anything that was TMCC controlled, 6-7 years ago. And that's pretty remarkable, and at a much more affordable price.
Exactly, and that's the key, capabilities versus affordable price.
This may be the one spot of technology as we talk about, collectability. Lion Chief and Lion Chief Plus may be, that one area that breaks the mold and where less is more in terms of the technology. One of the areas that I really wanted to bring up, and this always comes up in the discussion of technology, is the availability of parts. Is there a need for availability of parts, or does the upgrade kits that Lionel and MTH have supplied to continue to move these older locomotives forward completely negate that need for parts? What are your thoughts on that?
I think what you're going to find is, if Lionel allows it, the growth of a cottage industry that will supply these parts from Lionel to the individual hobbyist. In other words, you'll go to somebody who's really knowledgeable. They'll put in the upgrade for rail sounds, the upgrade for whatever it might be. And Lionel certainly wouldn't be doing it directly, but for certain authorized people may be able to supply the parts. Or as certain things break, okay, you may find it or private contractors may find it economic to reproduce these parts or to build versions of them that fit the Lionel engines. We'll have to see, but I think that nobody's just going to abandon them. The other thing that has not come true, okay, is if you take an engine that was built for Lionel in the 1990s with electronics, with early rail sounds and TMCC, they don't break. They've been running beautifully. The outside supplier, and I know who they were, and you did too, was Sandakan, built quality components. And I've got some New York Central Jeeps from the late 1990s and the middle 1990s that run beautifully, and they're run on a fairly regular basis. I use them a lot for public displays. figuring what the heck, something goes bad. But the thing is, the combination of a Cab 1 and a 1990s diesel is perfectly viable because those are digital parts, okay? They're solid-state parts, and they don't break. People who were so worried about that was going to happen, it hasn't happened. Maybe another 20 more years down the trail we'll see them breaking down, but the quality of production was so good that hasn't happened.
And I want to talk about that for a second because you say another 20 years down the road. Let's hop in our time machine here for a second. A lot of what I see, and maybe this is just my perspective from being younger, but the guys that are worried about parts availability in 20 years aren't going to be around in 20 years. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way at all.
You're absolutely right.
The ones that are so concerned about it, I think their trains are going to be the least of their worries. I think, let's say somebody is 50 now, and I don't hear a lot of the 50-year-olds on the forum complaining about, well, I'm worried about the parts being available. They're going to be 70 in 20 years. I'm not sure, and hopefully, Lord willing, that there's still a viable and vibrant part of this hobby. But a lot of us that are sitting back here kind of in the back seat of the car right now who are, late 20s, 30s, 40s, and even early 50s, I just don't see a lot of us concerned about whether or not something's going to be there to make it run.
No, because the attitude is different. That earlier generation grew up with Lionel trains run forever. You can drop them off the building, pick them up, pound out the dents, and put that mechanical unit back in there. That's the other thing. This all started when people had their first electronic units. Oh my God, what if it goes bad? What happens? Nothing, because they haven't been going bad, and people seem to the earlier folk, the older hobbyists, haven't understood or haven't realized that the catastrophe that was supposed to happen by these ephemeral electronics hasn't happened. It doesn't. When was the last time somebody replaced an old-fashioned electronic unit from the 1980s? It doesn't do. Yes, there are outside suppliers that will get you a better electronic unit, like Dali Electronics and some of the others. But how big a call is there for that? I'm just thinking of my own trains. I have yet to replace an electronic unit from the 80s.
Another interesting point, and we'll start heading towards a conclusion with this point. Something that I've noticed, and one of the interesting things that was brought up, and I will be interested to see if this happens, is the demand, and will there ever be a demand for PS1 engines that function exactly like a PS1 engine did the day it rolled off the line? Or, as we were just discussing, is the attitude of my generation and this younger generation so different that there may never be a nostalgia for a PS1 locomotive to function like a PS1 locomotive or a TMCC?
The short answer about PS1 is no, there will be no nostalgia for it because it was a transition piece. What it was an elaborate sound system that had the potential for limited use in command control, which was never really realized. There was no reason for it. No, you're not going to see that. TMCC, something else again, because the earlier ones were quite reliable. What you are seeing in some cases is a fellow has a beloved locomotive from the early 2000s or the late 1990s. They're upgrading the sound systems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay? In other words, TMCC is perfectly fine for the command control part, but gee whiz, that rail sound 5 sounds great, and I can get a guy to put that in for me, or I'll put it in myself. You see that over and over again on the forum. One guy who responded to this the question that I put up on the forum, I said, I've replaced the sound systems in my Lionel locomotives a couple of times, and not because anything was wrong with them, but because he wanted the greater functionality of the later rail sounds versions. I was fascinated by that, and matter of fact, I said to myself, oh my gosh, I've done that with a couple of my engines myself, so there you go.
And that begs the question, do people fall in love with the look of these locomotives and that's what they're nostalgic about, as opposed to the sounds where people know we can continually upgrade the sounds, but are they in love with the look of that locomotive, and that's what's nostalgic to them, not necessarily the functionality of the locomotive?
Short answer is yes. You become emotionally attached to your toys, and I hate to use the word toys, but let's face it, in many cases they are. And you've got an engine, you've liked it, it's been fun, it's really good to look at, and that's great. I'll use the analogy of cars. If you have a sports car from 10 or 15 years ago and it's something that you're emotionally attached to, you bet. You're in love with the car, as opposed to its functionality. It's certainly doesn't have the safety features that the new ones have. It doesn't have some of the capabilities that the ones have, but you don't care. You're out there, it's Saturday afternoon, you're driving your two-seater, and it's wonderful. And that's the same thing with some of the older locomotives. They run great. So, and they're something that you always wanted and cherished. Another perfect example is Lionel diesels that have the war bonnet. Okay, if you have one that runs well, do you really want? Are you attached to it? You bet you are.
You said something, bringing up the sports car for a second. We are not the only hobby that this upgrading happens in, and I think about my other hobby, which is muscle cars, and I have a 1968 Pontiac sitting down in the garage, and I find myself, and there's a movement in the collector car industry. Either you want a car to be all original, which is similar to the guys with the post-war trains. You want it as original as humanly possible. Or there's another group of us out there that I'm taking, technology that came out of Cadillacs in the mid and early 2000s, and I'm finding ways to integrate some of those things into a 1968 Pontiac. So we are not the only hobby that deals with this question of, well, do you leave it as stock as possibly stock can be, or do you start taking some of the technology and the creature comforts that we're becoming accustomed to on an everyday, this is what's in our regular car, and do we try to work it into the hobby?
Exactly.
And so we're not the only industry facing this.
No, not at all. One of the illustrations I'm going to use in the talk is I'm going to show you a Premier MTH engine, okay, at GP7. I'm going to say, is this Lionel or MTH? And people are going to go, what do you mean? He said, all the guts inside of it, all the electronics are Lionel. And we're going to talk about that replacement market as part of the discussion of what is technology worth something? What is the value of technology in the trains you buy? Because I've got a couple of hybrids like that are Lionel MTH, and perfect example of what you've been discussing here.
Right. All right, we're going to go ahead and we're going to try and put a bow tie on this package here. So we're going to bring it back to the original question and ask what your summarization and your thoughts are. Does technology affect the value of the trains we own?
Yes.
Put a bow tie on it.
All right. Not only does it affect the technology of the trains we buy, more and more so it will be a factor in valuation of the trains that we want, and the trains that we buy, and the trains that we sell. It's obvious. The question for the house is how much of a value put on it versus the engine or the accessory itself. But it's a reality already, and the question now is, how do we quantify it, or should we even bother?
And that is where we will leave it for today. I think you and I could spend a couple hours discussing this and not really get to a firm conclusion. But I agree with you that, yes, technology will affect the value of the trains that we own for a ton of reasons. But I'm really glad that this is the topic that you came up with to share this year, because I've been on the O-Gauge Railroading Forum. You and I have been on the forum long time. And I feel like this is the first time, and this doesn't happen often, that we've really covered this topic in some depth. And it's a discussion that I think people have had in passing, but I think this is going to become a question more and more as we go here.
Okay, I guess we're going to leave it there. That's fine.
Okay. You've been listening to Ed Boyle, partner and special projects manager and collector gallery guru at O-Gauge Rarity Magazine. Ed, I love having you on the show. We always have fascinating discussions. This one is another great example of that. Thanks for your time, and we'll talk to you again down the road here.
Thanks again, Derek. It was a lot of fun to do that.
That'll wrap it up here for another evening at the LCCA convention in Boston. A couple of notes before we go. Make sure you come back here every evening this week at 7 p.m. or thereabouts. We'll have a new episode for you all the way through the rest of the week. The other thing is, if you like the show and you want the latest information about the show, there are a couple of ways you can get that information. Head on over to notch6.com and grab our email list. You can sign up on the right-hand side of the page and get on our email list. We will send periodic emails letting you know when big interviews or things like that are coming. The best way to keep up with us is on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/notch6. We post a lot of updates there about what's going on, what's coming when, and so that'll be a great way to keep up with us this week as well. Special thanks to Ed Boyle for his great interview, Dennis Hall, who is our editor and producer, for helping put this great show together, and Al Kolis, my co-host for this week. That'll do it for this evening. We'll see you tomorrow night. Until then, keep it in Notch 6.
Thanks for listening to Notch 6, the only podcast dedicated to O-Gauge trains. You can find every episode on our website, notch6.com, or on iTunes and Stitcher. We'll see you again soon. Until then, be sure to keep it in Notch 6. The following has been a production of Notch 6 Media and is intended for private use only. This show may not be copied or redistributed without express written consent. This show copyright 2015, all rights reserved.